This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee to talk about the fourth episode in the book of Boba Fett. This episode is entitled, let me get the exact one, The Gathering Storm. Kind of sounds like the title of a High Republic novel, but it's called The Gathering Storm. We have two guests today to talk about this episode. First, our returning guest and everyone's favorite little buddy, Tom Gross.
Well, hello, everybody. I always love being everybody's little buddy. It's great to be on again tonight to talk the book of Boba Fett.
Yes, well, it is great to have you back on the show. And as we always do, you and I have not talked about this at all. So this is going to be a fresh conversation, organic.
Yes.
That's the way we prefer it. We also have his first time on Coffee with Kenobi, but he is no stranger to the world of Star Wars podcasting. He is the host of Force Ghost Conversations, the one and only Anthony King. Anthony, welcome to Coffee with Kenobi.
Hello. Thank you all for having me here. This is so exciting. And I just can't wait to geek out about this wonderful episode with you all.
Well, it's great. I mean, your show is fantastic. You have a wonderful, the word we keep using is cozy and comfortable and just a nice, warm environment. So you will fit along just perfectly, my friend. And I always, I appreciate you joining us on CWK Live every Monday as well.
Absolutely. Always happy to bring the cozy.
I love it. Well, let's go ahead and talk about this episode. Not a lot of cozy in the book of Boba Fett, especially for this episode. But we open the episode in a very interesting place. Before we get to that, let's go ahead. And Anthony, I'm going to have you go first since you are the guest. Tell us your overall reactions to the episode and a letter grade.
Okay. My overall reaction is I loved it. This episode was fantastic. It was magnificent. It hit all the beats that I wanted to, that I'm looking for when it comes to a Book of Boba Fett episode. There's a lot of heart, there's a lot of action, and there's a lot of intrigue in terms of the politics of it all. So I'm going to give this a solid A. This is probably my favorite episode so far, the entire series.
Oh,
and I can't wait to get into this all.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Well, that bodes very, very well. Tom, what about you?
I guess the first thing I thought of as I was watching this was there's a lot going on here. I wondered if we would ever pop out of a flashback and come to current day, which we did. And so it was like, wow, a lot was packed into this particular episode. Anthony, I'm going to agree with you that I think this is my favorite episode as well. I think other episodes have favorite moments, but as a whole, this is my favorite. So I will give it my highest grade of the series so far, and that is a solid A. Really, really like this one.
Not an A+. You have given an A before.
Oh, have I? Okay,
yes.
Then I think episode probably 2, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to give it right up there I'll give it an A, but I will still say this one supersedes episode 2.
But not an A+.
Not yet.
Whew, you are a tough grader. You don't think that A+ can be given out freely if they are earned. You're only going to give one out?
Not necessarily. Well, you guys might change my mind. We need to talk at the end of the show about grades, because oftentimes that's why we have these conversations.
Well, Professor King and Professor Zare are going to change your mind, I think.
That's right, because it's very possible. Look, you could convince me.
All right. Well, I also am going to give this name. I'm giving it an A+. I don't know. Is it my favorite one of the series? To me, the second one is going to be impossible. Not impossible, but very, very hard to be, because it's so mythic in the scope and in the way that Fett becomes a part of that tribe. But this one's really spectacular. There's a whole lot going on. I've watched it multiple times, and even then, there are certain things that I wrote down that I'd forgotten, and you kind of forget the order of when things happen, because there's a lot that coalesces together to create quite a fascinating story. We're going to just kick it off at the beginning. We see right away we're in the Bacta tank, so we're going into flashback, which at our house, at the Zare household, the flashbacks are our favorite parts. So we're in Jabba's gate, and we see kind of what Fett is looking for. And then we see some Bantha bonding. Anthony, kick it off for us. Tell us what you kind of make about the opening sequence up to him bonding with his trusty Harry steed.
Well, that's a great way to put it. And honestly, I just want to give a great shout out to the crew that put this episode together. I mean, those opening shots and sequences of this episode are just really cinematic and spectacular. And there's really no other way to describe it other than just absolutely stellar. So, you get to the front there, the main part of the episode where you see Boba looking at the gates of Jabba's palace, and he notes that there is a couple of guards out front, and it's pretty heavily guarded. And then, of course, you get these great moments and interactions with him engaging with the Bantha, so to speak. And it's just really some heartfelt moments there where he's just able to play with this creature and to really connect with him on an empathetic level that has really been a real tenet of this series. I mean, the engagement that he's had with several Banthas in the course of his time with the Tuskens, and of course later on with his time in his interaction in the last episode with the Rancor. So very excited to see how this plays out. And of course, there's some wonderful, hilarious moments throughout the course of the episode with the Bantha alone. So just add some nice humor and some heart to this series that is really, really welcome.
Agreed. And Tom, is there anything that stood out for you in those two opening scenes?
It's just a general comment of the flashbacks don't seem so far back now. And there's some things that happen, of course, through the episode that really give us a certain time and place. But when it jumped back, I was like, oh, I don't feel like we're really going back that far. And when he looked through the scope at Jabba's palace, I really had to kind of like ground myself and figure out, when are we? And it just, I don't know why, but, and I will say, I have only seen the episode once. So that also, I'm going back to my grade. That could also be part of why I'm a little hesitant to give it the A+. But yeah, I guess that would be my comment on the opener is I really needed that to sort of ground myself into where are we going and where are we with Boba Fett.
Sure. I think the thing that stands out to me, one is Bib Fortuna has a lot more guards than I expected. I don't know how he's able to keep them around. We learn he uses guile and deceit, which of course he does. But I'm surprised that it works as long as it does, but it obviously does. The thing with the Bantha, though, I think is really important. I've said repeatedly, and people have said to me, do you think Boba Fett's a good guy or a bad guy? I mean, he's got to be a good guy. I mean, it's a different kind of a good guy, though, isn't he? But the way he treats animals, and I think, Tom, you may have pointed that out last week, but I think it's super insightful to what is going on inside this man's soul. The Bantha is wagging his tail. He's sticking out his tongue. They're sharing food together. The way he talks and communicates with the Bantha, I find it so endearing. I never, ever would have thought I would look at Boba Fett and think, well, that's a man that's sweet to animals. But it just adds an interesting dimension to his character that I think is pretty important. Anthony, what do you make of that particular aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I've had people in my life tell me that you can really tell a person's true character from how they interact with animals. So, I mean, just the way alone that you can tell that Boba is engaging with these creatures that, we really haven't seen too much screen time of in the course of all of Star Wars. And now we're getting more time with them and just seeing how he's able to interact with them and be playful with them, have fun with them. It just really adds to the depth of what Boba is, and it just shows that he's not just necessarily this gun for hire that's ruthless, that has no heart or emotion to it. It just adds more depth to this character that has been, in the zeitgeist for Star Wars for so long.
And I think that the narrative has sort of been wiped clean for him being just a ruthless, most deadly bounty hunter. I mean, we're going to talk about that a lot in this episode, and we'll get to that. But he makes several declarative statements about his sort of his inner, not his inner child, but sort of his identity, what he identifies with. But Tom, he eventually finds Fennec, and it's great because we get sort of a homage to the Mandalorian in this episode. Where we see the lights pop up. We remember the flare from the 4th episode of the first season. And then you hear the music very, very quickly. In fact, the second time I watched it, it's super quick. Like I didn't even hear it the second time. But it's there. He finds Fennec and he goes to a mod parlor to help her. Now we remembered in the tragedy when Fennec Shand shows like her abdomen is been cybernetically enhanced. Now we see what happened. There's a lot going on in this scene, and music plays a big part of it as well. And I know you're a big music guy, so Tom, kind of break down this sequence for us. Not necessarily a summary, of course, but just kind of what you noticed.
Yeah. So I have to tell you that I watched. There were other people in the room when I watched, non-Star Wars fans. Okay, my wife
good.
in particular. And I'm going to go back to the Bantha real quick because it ties into the mod parlor. And when I didn't even know my wife was really watching, and when the Bantha licks his lips and wags his tail, I heard behind me my wife go, "Really?" And I was shaking my head. I was like, I can only appreciate it so much. I loved it, but it also I think reminds us to not take Star Wars too seriously. It's fun. We have to remember that Star Wars is intended to be fun. And so when they go to the mod parlor, I thought this could be kind of gruesome. This could be sort of rough. He's carrying a very wounded Fennec Shand. And by the way, how I had to pump my fist when you hear the Mandalorian's notes and you're just like, oh yes, that's, that is a very specific, here we are. This is the big on the map. Here you are, that, or whatever it says.
Like
but
you're in the mall.
Definitely,
you are here.
Yes, you are here. That's what I was looking for. And so I was like, oh yeah, I know what's happening. And then, but he just like, she's in bad shape. And so they could have taken two different routes with the mod parlor. You could go the gruesome Frankenstein route, or you could go the route they took, which, nobody in the mod parlor was like a joker or anything like that. But the scene itself, I felt like was pretty light. It was very approachable. It was very, quote, digestible for me as a fan watching. I mean, there's a lot of like forgiveness you have to give to the storytelling of it. Like, okay, really, this is the way this is going down. But it didn't bother me at all. I loved it. I thought it was so great. And so I don't know. I liked the way that the guy who was I almost felt like rather than a mod parlor, I thought it was more like a tattoo parlor. Like the way people are sitting around. When he walks in, he says, "Aren't you a little old for that?" and then he drops the money and says, "You should have started with that." I mean, I love that interaction and exchange. And then he gets the business. And then it feels like surgery, but you don't have the beeping sounds. You don't have the crazy lights and the white and all of that. And it just, I don't know, it really worked for me. It was very simplified, but it worked for me. I liked watching the different components, the hydraulics and the tubes and all of that going into Fennec. And probably, I don't remember the exact line. Hopefully one of you does. When Boba Fett says, "Aren't you going to cover her up?" And what does the parlor guy say? "That's too much. That's too beautiful." Or that's,
and hide this this beautiful machinery.
Yes. I thought that was great. So it was a fun, I thought it really made it fun for me to watch that transformation of Fennec Shand.
So it wasn't really presented as like a Frankenstein or a
no
sort of thing like you mentioned. That was an interesting word I hadn't thought of before. If anything, the tattoo parlor is an apt comparison that I had written down. And it's almost like the techno music makes it seem like it's a party.
Yeah.
Like for whatever reason, these individuals have decided this is clout, this is status, this is cool, this is how I want to live my life. And as they're walking in, you've got someone who could be easily perhaps confused with Tech from the Bad Batch, looking with those two goggled electronic eyes staring into them. And I don't know if it worked for me, but I just in my mind I was like, okay, this is where we're at and this is what we're doing. And so I'm interested to see what people think about it. But there had to be a way to explain what happened to Fennec Shand. She didn't seem, at least initially, too traumatized by the fact that part of her body is metal, but also it saved her life. Anthony, anything jump out for you about this sequence?
Oh, well, I just want to really echo a lot of what Tom said there. I really liked this sequence. And it, especially that techno music, that really was just something so unique to Star Wars. I mean, the techno vibe is really something that you only really get in like maybe a few episodes of the Clone Wars early on. Is something that they really experimented with in the music, I believe. So to have that in Star Wars now, especially in the circumstances they use it, it really makes a lot of sense. I did a lot of laser tagging back in the day.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the soundtrack that was when I did that activity. And so it really brought me back to some old times. And we just watched all the Matrix movies in our household. So it was really reminiscent of seeing that and how it kind of connected on those fronts to that. Again, I like the tattoo kind of inspiration for the parlor. It made a lot of sense to me. And I think it gave a lot of respect and credence to this mod group. And especially when you tie it back to the third episode where there's the whole mod gang and Boba is really not tripped up at all by them when the prospector comes in. He's like, oh, they got mods and they've they've done stuff to their bodies, and he's just okay. And I almost forgot entirely that Fennec it would be technically considered a modded person too. I just never really put two and two together when it came to that until this episode, and it really helped me recontextualize that in its own right. So yeah, I thought it was a great sequence. I thought it was a lot of fun. And, I'm a person that's definitely afraid of needles, and I was able to watch this sequence in its entirety. So I'm very thrilled that it was done in a very, very good manner.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad. Well, I'm glad it worked for the both of you. It didn't work for me, but it didn't not work for me. I'm just sort of ambivalent to it. It's just like, okay. But because I think there's some interesting things there. There's got to be metaphor to this. I'm not quite sure where I'm at with what the metaphor might be, but maybe that will make more sense as we see more from this idea of what it means to mod or modify your actual body cybernetically.
Right.
So once they leave there, Fennec comes to. She and Fett introduce one another, I guess, formally and unofficially. I think in every single episode he says, "I am Boba Fett." I think that's actually true, which is interesting. But they make a deal, and we learn about Boba Fett's plan and part of what is motivating him. I think there's some new pieces of information in this sequence. One of the things to me that I thought was the most important is that Boba Fett blames himself for what happened to the Tuskens.
Oh.
And then Fennec Shand is surprised that some Nikto were able to overtake some Tuskens. I think that's interesting as well. But then the way that they kind of broker their deal and how she agrees to work with him and why that is. So, Anthony, I'll let you start with this one, and then Tom, what stands out to you about their conversation about the fire?
Well, this is great. I think that there's maybe 3 conversations or so throughout this episode that you could probably call fireside chats.
They are. Yes.
And there's just a lot of juicy material all throughout these quote unquote fireside chats. It's probably the greatest line delivery in this entire episode is Tim Morrison saying, his left on the sands of Tatooine, just his delivery in that and how he's stoic and just looks straight at her is just so powerful. And I was left in goosebumps every time he said it, and I watched the episode. So I really loved that. And I too caught that note that you mentioned, Dan, of his remorse and almost his role for what happened to the Tuskens. He almost he blames himself a little bit for this. And that's something interesting to see how that progresses throughout the rest of the episode. And I also appreciated how Fennec also shed a doubt on the fact that the speeder bike group was able to take out a whole band of Tuskens. And it's something that I also kind of thought through is they were a pretty powerful tribe. They probably just didn't have help on their own. And it really shed some light on that. Maybe there was some other hands at play here that Boba isn't considering the full picture itself. So yeah, I really appreciated the scene. And of course it leads to the next sequence here, which is fantastic. So we'll let that go.
Yeah, we definitely. Tom, anything that stands out with their dialogue or anything?
Sure. This chat here was kind of what I've been waiting for, because through the Mandalorian we know they've got this really tight relationship. And so this was the start. This was the beginning. And I wasn't surprised, but there's a part of me that, knowing where it ends up or where it goes, I was a little surprised at how bristly she was with him, but it made sense. It all made sense. I understood it. It just, as a person knowing the relationship, I was like, man, she's really, well, what I got from this, or what I guess the reminder I needed that was put in here, is her thinking that Boba Fett's dead. We kind of forget that as viewers of the show, because as fans, up until we knew that there was going to be a Book of Boba, or I guess until he shows up in The Mandalorian, we all do think he's dead. But he's been in The Mandalorian. We started the show, and so I've kind of lost that sense that he's a ghost. So I liked that reminder, and it makes sense for her character to feel that way. It just, for me as a viewer, I needed that reminder that okay, so Boba Fett is not someone people know at this time. When he's with the Tusken Raiders, he's off everyone's radar.
Right.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else that Anthony didn't talk about this conversation. I think you covered it all, Anthony. But yeah, that was the big thing for me, was, oh yeah. And then just seeing the beginning of this relationship, seeing her sort of warm a little bit. I did appreciate that stoicism when he says, "Left on the sands of Tatooine."
He has such
fantastic.
Wonderful delivery. He's just a
Wonderful.
great performer.
Yeah,
I think it's important that he says, why she agrees to work with him. He doesn't throw in her face that he saved her life. It's just how he kind of opens things. I saved your life. And, I need your help. I've got some debts, not some debts, but I've got some, what is the word he uses? To basically say, I've got some things I got to take care of. I can't remember the word.
Yeah. I can't remember what he says either.
I don't know what it is. But he's got some things he needs to take care of. And then once I've got that stuff taken care of, get my ship back, you're good. Then your debt is with me is clean, and we're good to go. So then they show them riding on the back of that Bantha. I love the Bantha. I've always been like, Banthas are fine, but this one is so cute. And not just because it does a great Gene Simmons impression.
It really does, yeah.
Oh my goodness!
But I just like that. But another thing I'm thinking is, how it must take 10 times as long to ride a Bantha across the Dune Sea. Forever. I hope they've got their phones charged, because my goodness, it's going to make for some long conversations. When they finally get there to where they're going, we find out, I don't know if this is like the new name of Boba Fett's ship, or this is a particular model, but he calls it a fire spray gunship. And I've never heard that term before. Have you two?
No, first time.
But I can imagine it. I can see it in my head why it's called that. I think
Absolutely.
of Jango Fett's chase of Obi-Wan.
Mm-hmm. And where the cannons are. And yeah, absolutely. So they go to Jabba's palace, and something happens, Tom, that reminded me of Dungeons and Dragons. What do you think I'm going to say?
Oh. I mean, besides the infiltration of a castle and going in through the sewers and in through the kitchen, I don't know what. Oh my gosh!
So they don't know how many guards are in there. No, it's not a failure. So you know what it is. So she sends like this droid that goes in and maps everything out. It reminds me of whenever we play Dungeons and Dragons, and one of our friends sends in a bat.
It sends in the bat.
Around. That's all I kept thinking about.
That's
I
great.
knew you'd like that. But it's a great moment where she goes around. It's a very, very handy droid that's able to do that. They map it all out, and then Boba Fett has to say goodbye to the Bantha, which I found to be a nice little scene. He has to really convince her. We find out the gender of the beast to go away, and he throws food to get it to leave. Apparently, by the way, Banthas are also carnivores as well.
Caught that,
but but I thought that was it's just nice the way he says, go make little baby Banthas, or go make little Banthas and roam free in the Dune Sea. It just very, very charming. I mean, really, I have a very, very hard time believing that Boba Fett is going to end up being treacherous at the end of this, because I feel like that's a mirror into his soul. I really do.
I've enjoyed the interplay with the animal. It to the point where it kind of makes me just shake my head and smile. Like, okay, I never thought this is what I would be
I know.
watching Boba Fett do, but I can appreciate it. I can appreciate it. It's, especially realizing this is a flashback, and we know the animal that he has an interest in the future. And so this all just sort of comes in, makes a lot of sense, but it just sort of makes me go, okay, didn't know I needed this, but I do.
Okay, Anthony, anything on that before we get into the actual castle itself?
So I watched this episode first on my lunch break at work, and when this particular sequence happened, I started bursting out laughing, and caught some eyes looking at me like, "What are you doing over there?" I said, "Yeah, Boba Fett." So that was a real great moment, and I really liked that they had like this second kind of fireside chat there, as they're preparing for entering into I guess Jabba's palace, Bib's palace now, whatever you might want to call it here. And I love getting an official name for Boba Fett's ship now, the Fire Spray Gun ship. I thought that's really cool. It's pretty metal, as we would say in my household.
It is.
And we can finally settle the debate on what it's called now.
Is there anything about their dialogue that I feel like I didn't write it down, but I feel like there's some more key stuff that the two of them say to one another in the second chat?
Yeah, he says like she asked him, why don't you just go ask for it for his for the ship, and then he's like, I probably wouldn't like the answer because I'm not as persuasive without my armor. Which it's fascinating on several sides there. From how I interpreted it, is that they don't view Boba as an equal to even just walk, or they didn't even view it as his ship or his property, right?
Right.
They're laying claim to it, and so if he were to go in there and say like that's mine, they're going to say no. They don't view him as an equal. They don't treat him as such. He doesn't even have their respect in his eyes after all the work he's done for them and all that.
So strange.
So just that's interesting, and I think that there's something to be said about the want for his armor. We just went through this whole sequence where he literally learned how to fight with the gaffy stick and learning the whole Tusken culture, and he's a warrior in his own right without the armor, without the blasters, without all that stuff. And the fact that he still needs his armor in order to set himself out, I mean, that's very interesting in terms of identity, which makes sense to me why he wants to parade around with his helmet off in the streets of Mos Espa throughout the remainder of the current, when they go back to the current time.
Right. It's so challenging to me because based on how you just said it, I think that's important. It seems like he would have been at peace not having the armor or just not thinking about it. Maybe he always does, and we just don't know. We're not privy to his private thoughts typically. And besides these little fireside chats where we really gotten to see quite a bit more. Because in The Mandalorian, it seems very clear, painfully clear if you're a stormtrooper, that he wants that armor and he is not taking no for an answer. So I think that makes him a little more complex. I mean, it's very possible that, he gets away from it and he's focusing on who he is now, but ultimately you can't get away from it. And this is a connection to his father. By the way, random thought, this is the first flashback sequence we've seen where he doesn't picture himself as Daniel Logan.
Right. I noted that as well. And to go along to build on this conversation about Boba Fett and his armor, I feel like this whole concept really gives a human side to Boba Fett. Almost like he has an inferiority complex. Like with the Tusken culture, he felt comfortable. He felt like a warrior. They gave him the robe and all of that. But then when he rejoins, quote, his world of bounty hunters and smugglers, and that he still feels like he needs that identity. And so he has this great adventure or journey to reclaim his visual identity of finding this armor. Now, granted, it gives him a lot, it gives him serious protection and being Beskar, but I feel like it's more than that. I feel like it's more, he wants to reestablish some kind of identity, and which doesn't make sense. And that's where you come in when you say it's complex, Dan, because we've spent so much of these first 3 or 4 episodes talking about this is a new Boba Fett. He's had a rebirth. He's had a re-imaging, but he still can't let go of that past. And so I am curious where, like, when we go back to present day, what does this all mean? But certainly I can look at Boba Fett between his love of animals that we had no idea existed and this humanization of him. And also I love when she says, you've got, Fennec Shan says, you've gotten soft, or she says something along those lines. And like instantly in my head, I'm like, no, he's tough. He's stronger now. And I was really proud of him to say, no, I think I'm, more powerful now, or I don't remember his exact line.
It says it made me stronger. Everyone, something along the lines of, everyone needs a tribe.
Yeah.
Oh, that might have been the line of the episode for me. I'm glad you said that, Dan, because I totally forgot this is where it was. So I absolutely loved that line, because if we jump clear to the big picture of Star Wars and this concept of hope, where do we find hope when we're alone? We find hope when we're with our tribe, when we're with our people. And he will also talk. Is this the conversation? Is this when he has the conversation too with her about we shouldn't, we can't always be bounty hunters, or we need, we can be different people. And so he's almost building his own tribe and starting with her. I don't know, a lot going on there. I've talked too much. So I don't want to admit, let's keep the episode moving though, because I think there's a lot more to be said about it.
I do too. Anthony, anything you want to say before we take a quick break?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of cap off this fireside chat here, we kind of get his end game a little bit here, where he's basically says he's tired of working for basically idiots who are going to get him killed. He's tired of working for inept leaders. And, we've all had this in our lives probably, where we work for people that aren't necessarily the best, and we thought we could do this better ourselves. And we kind of get why he's going to basically take out Bib Fortuna eventually, and why he's going to start this family, this tribe. He's going to try and recreate the wheel. And I liked Fennec's kind of quip to that. It's like, are we cut out for doing that? Can we do that? Can we change? And I just like how she had a lot more to do in this episode compared to the rest of the series so far. And that was a real big standout for me, is how she was able to just be the foil to him. That for every idealist, you need someone that's a realist to kind of keep them in check. And that's where I really see Fennec playing that role for Boba so far.
Interesting.
And that is really captured in this fireside chat.
Beautifully said. I like that very much. That's a really good comparison. The only thing I really scratch my head over is why does he feel like he was double crossed by Bib Fortuna? Because Bib Fortuna has his ship, or is there more to it? I feel like there's not much more that's going to be said, because they show in his memories that he kills Bib Fortuna, as we see at the end of The Mandalorian season 2. So I'm not 100% sure why he thinks Bib Fortuna double crossed him. Anybody have any ideas on that?
I've got nothing at this point. I hope that they kind of explain that a bit more, either in the series or maybe through a comic or a short story book, something like that. I would love to know a bit more about this quote unquote double crossing that he references.
Yeah.
The only thing that I can come up with is that he just feels like Bib Fortuna left him out there to die. And maybe there's some sort of an arrangement. Who knows? But that's the only thing I can think, is that he just left them there.
But surely, like, he would know. I mean, if he's in the Sarlacc pit, most people don't seem to have any idea. That brings up a key point that we're going to talk about after the break. How much time has passed in this story? We'll come back and talk about that and figure out the end of this incredible episode, including some major action sequences. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
We are back talking about the 4th chapter in the book of Boba Fett. I raised a question before the break, gentlemen, about time. So she mentions, being with the Tuscans has made you soft. He says, no, it's made me strong. And he mentions his time spent with the Tuscans. We know between the Return of the Jedi and the Mandalorian is 5 years. And we can safely assume that season 2 of the Mandalorian is, I don't know how much time has passed between the end of season 1 and season 2. This can't be more than 6 months to a year. So either he was in the Sarlacc pit for a very long time, or he's with the Tuscans for a very long time. We legitimately, and I looked for plenty of context clues and plenty of clues. At this point, at the time of the recording of this episode of Coffee with Kenobi, it's really, dare I say, impossible to know, but it must have been much more substantial than we realized.
I feel like, and I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound like a joke, but as much time as it takes to cross the desert on those Banthas that we already mentioned, it has to be a massive amount of time. But that put aside, my assumption is he spent a year, if not more, with the Tusken Raiders. You don't become a master fighter, even as skilled as he was coming into being a Tusken Raider or into the Tusken Raider camp. He still had to learn an entire culture. He had to build their trust. He had to master the art of the Tusken Raiders. In fact, I would be disappointed if I knew that it was a rushed thing. We just saw bits and pieces. We see snapshots of his time with the Tusken Raiders, but it had to be a day in, day out drudgery of training, doing chores for them, everything to build that trust up. So I'm guessing a couple years. I cannot possibly believe he would have been in the Sarlacc pit too terribly long. Sure, the Beskar is tough, but his entire body isn't covered in Beskar. He has pants and open areas that certainly the digestive juices of a Sarlacc had to have gotten
acid.
I'm guessing hours. I'm guessing just hours within the Sarlacc, a day or two at most. So my bet goes most of his time was spent with the Tusken Raiders.
I think so as well. So we got to get the ship. We got to get the fire spray gunship or whatever Boba Fett starship. So Anthony, give us some highlights that you experienced this. I'm gonna just jump in really quickly and say the rat catcher droid sequence was really delightful and a bit disturbing kind of at the end, but really entertaining.
Yeah, I did love that sequence too. I think they called it a lep droid, and that was It reminded me a lot of the scene in Jurassic Park with the Velociraptors and the kids at the end. Just the way how it was shot, and just in the kitchen sequence too. It was really, and I thought it was a neat callback if there was any connection at all to that. I also really liked the chef droid. I thought that was a very practical droid to have in your kitchen, especially as we saw in episode 3, all the food that is prepared for the daimyo. You're going to need a lot of hands to chop up stuff there. So that was, I thought that was a really neat addition to the Star Wars universe here. But there's just a lot of great action sequences here. I really liked how Fennec really got to show off what it means to be a master assassin. She blew up the Gonk droid, took out several of the guards. She's basically just shooting left and right, taking them out. She makes the impossible shot to get that to get the door, the gate open so they can fly out. It was a really well done action sequence. So that's some of my highlights for there.
And when EV-99 walks out, it certainly sounds like EV-99. In the captions, it mentions it's a sous chef droid.
That too, yeah.
And it's hard
Sous
not
chef.
to see the other droid. It's hard not to think of General Grievous, which I'm sure that is not an accident, of course. But very entertaining and suspenseful. The volume of henchmen that Bib Fortuna has was pretty daunting. They were easily overrun, but Fennec's such a crack shot and finally gets the Fed ship fired up. I really liked the sequence a lot. I thought it was very effective. I really enjoyed that. I felt legitimate suspense about how they were going to escape. You know they are because you see him fly that ship around in The Mandalorian. But the pacing of it and the fact that it wasn't a gimme by any stretch of the imagination, I thought was very, very powerful. And one of the reasons why this episode is so good to me.
I really enjoyed this whole sequence of going into the palace from the start. Now, if it weren't an opportunity to see Slave One, the fire spray, ship, whatever, Boba Fett's starship, then I would have said that the kitchen scene steals the show. Those droids had so much character. I loved that whole thing when they're like, I think there's a rat in here. And then the sous chef walks over and goes, nope, it can't be a rat. It must be something different. But apparently someone had called the rat catcher anyway. And then just that thing. And then we mentioned General Grievous. What I thought when I was sitting there and it pulled out the knives and it raises the arms like Grievous does, all I could think was somewhere there was a droid designer in Star Wars in the galaxy that looked at General Grievous and thought, that would make a good kitchen model droid.
Yes.
And they put it into practice. So who knows? General Grievous inspired a droid designer to make a perfect kitchen chef. Anyway,
big
I really
ragu.
thought that was a lot. a very gourmet ragu. No, I really enjoyed that. I thought the chasing around the rat catcher droid was fun. And even she gives him kind of a look like, are you done now? Like, can we move on? like Anthony, when you said, we need somebody who's the realist in the group. That's what she does for him so many times. But then they go and there's his ship. And you're just like, there's a part of me that's kind of like, man, I almost wish that I didn't know that they had actually rescued it. But anyway, I mean, we did. And so it didn't really matter, but there's a part of me that's just like, oh my gosh, is he really going to get it out of here? And I like how she's the star of this. I mean, he goes into the ship and gets it ready while she handles everything out. This is everything in episodes 1, 2, and 3. My, not complaint, but I kind of missed, and I've said, I kind of missed Fennec Shand and their interplay. And this was the episode I was waiting for. This is where I wanted to see her pull the rifle out. This is where I wanted to see her pick off some dudes and really stretch her legs. And she did it. My favorite part of it, the two favorite parts, were when he's rotating the ship and the gun turret is scraping across the wall. You really feel the suspense there, as you mentioned, Dan. Like, how are they going to get this out of here? I kept thinking, how's he ever going to fly this thing without the end of his ship? But then I really liked her problem solving for getting the gate open. She sees the weights. She's like, do it. And what a great visual, like the directing of this. Close the ramp, and she's standing there as it's closing, shoots with her sniper rifle, as she is best known for, hits the rope, the weight drops, the thing goes up, and then they cut back to her as the gate closes, and you just see her like, oh yes. It was a wonderful moment. If I was in the theater, I would have cheered. I would have cheered.
Yeah. It's really great. So they get that, they make it happen, they escape. They have some fun interplay that doesn't sound like a cheesy 80s Arnold Schwarzenegger gag, but it works. I like the subtlety of it. I like it's not that he's non-emotive, but Seymour Morrison has so much strength in every syllable that he utters that even when he's joking, there's some fun strength behind it. But he never comes across as menacing. He doesn't try to throw his weight around again, which I think is so surprising considering the reputation that we have as fans have believed him to have all of this time. So they escape, and right away we see the revenge sequence where he flies overhead and takes out those Nikto speeder bikers, and then at the end he uses like some sort of a missile or proton torpedo of some kind. It's not a proton torpedo, but something reminiscent of that as well. The only thing I want to say about this, I thought it was a beautifully shot sequence. I thought it was very effective, but it was much less personal because it was from far away and using a blaster fire from a ship itself. I sort of expected him to do it on the ground with his gaffy stick, just much more intimately, as far as like personal revenge. But I have a feeling that part of the story isn't done. Anything any of you guys want to say about that? Because I really want to talk about being reunited with the Sarlacc pit once again.
Actually, if I could say just one quick thing about their banter on the way there, I wanted to bring something up. I love that sequence and that banter, of course, but I think she added the line where Fennec Shan said, "Next time we stick to the plan," implying that they're going to continue doing jobs and activities together and continue on this quest, even though that her debt is finished. And it really it reminded me a lot of how the story of Solo progressed and was told, where Chewie doesn't necessarily have a life debt to Han. He chooses to be with Han, which is something that's really important and impactful to me. Like, they have a bond that's not by obligation. And that kind of similar instance takes place here, where her debt has been paid, and then she chooses to be with him because of the leader that he is, and respects his vision and mission and what he's setting out to do. So that's something that I noted there that I wanted to have on the record. And
he says, "Where do you want it? Where do you want me to drop you off?" And she says, "I think I'm just going to go along for the ride." And I think that, like, her having that agency and that choice, and recognizing that this guy's not trying to tell her what to do or hire her, but just treat her like an equal is pretty cool.
Absolutely. And I did note too the same kind of similar thing, how he could have basically taken out this entire group on a more personal, brutal, grounded level, but he just did it quick and to the point, which is probably more merciful than what they did to the Tusken group. That's something I noticed there.
I agree. Let's talk about the return of the Sarlacc. To me, the sequence was very stressful as they are lowering his ship closer and closer and closer, and you can't see. Some great work with the cinematography and the lighting. When the Sarlacc finally jumps, I got the Sarlacc moment that I was hoping from the first episode, where you get to see the special edition version of the Sarlacc pit reaching out to try to grab at them, her unclipping her safety harness and falling like on the glass right into the face of the Sarlacc. The whole thing was really great. I don't want to take what you guys are going to say, so I'll pick up the Sarlacc pieces after. But Tom, what stands out to you about this sequence?
This was interesting. It kind of took me by surprise. I was not expecting a return to the Sarlacc, but boy, am I glad they did. Because the first thing that came to mind was, boy, he really is like, he's going back to the beginning of his new life, searching for his old identity, and I'm so happy that it wasn't there, for lots of reasons. I mean, we know the story already of what, how he comes back to his armor, but there's something about that going, flying back to the beginning, and he's looking for something. I mean, obviously it's his armor, but I feel like there's more to it. Going back to our conversation where I mentioned inferiority complex, and that he's still searching for himself, I guess.
You think he has an inferiority complex?
Well, I mean, he's like, he says, well, I need my armor. I can't do the next steps without my armor. And I'm like, I don't know. I look at him, and he's got the black robe, and he's got the gaffy stick. He has this new identity that is frightening and powerful. And so,
but not to a bunch of gangsters. Yeah.
But I feel like he doesn't believe in it for some reason. And so I guess that's where I go, the inferiority complex. Maybe not.
I don't know. I don't see it that way, but I like that idea. It'll be interesting to see how that gets fleshed out.
But so he's flashing the light in there, and I don't know if it's my favorite line, but the line that really made me aware was when she says, "Be careful." I'm like, it's dead. He killed it. He burned it, but apparently didn't finish it off. And so it was a little horror like
Yes.
Like Alien, where it pops out at you and it like goes for the thing, and it kind of reminded me of the Rathtar scenes
Agreed.
in Force Awakens.
Force Awakens, yeah.
And so it became fun. And I have to say, when she dropped the seismic charge into it, it was like it took me back to like World War II, where they set off the nuclear bombs underground as tests. I mean, this was no test, but it's still, I was like, what's that going to look like when that happens? It was a little underwhelming knowing the destruction it does in the asteroid field, but it did the job, and it did what I thought it was going to do. I just thought it might have a little more impact.
Well, a lot of it's under the surface, and as you know, as we talked about before, from Galaxy's Edge, the Sarlacc, its entire body is there. So that was great. And then as the ship rises and you see kind of the pieces flake off, I thought it was interesting, Anthony, that even after that, he still climbs in there again without any protection because he doesn't really have any. Oh, yeah. And she's very nurturing to him, almost motherly. Like I haven't seen anyone talking about romance, and I'm glad they haven't. And maybe they have. I don't know. To me, it seems very clear that this is just it's two people that have a lot in common, but there's zero romance, and it's not about attraction or undertones of flirtation or romantic tension. It's more about two equals getting the job done that actually are starting to care about each other and in a very healthy platonic way. And I really like that aspect of it. I hope that continues throughout, and I don't imagine that it won't. But even like she's dumping the water on him, and she's like, you got to get a bacta tank because you're covered in acid. I mean, yeah, the Beskar protects you, but you still got acid on your body. You've got a lot of damage and a lot of wounds. So I was glad that was actually acknowledged. But the teamwork, the suspense, him climbing down there again, it's very fair to say, gentlemen, that I sort of expected, and maybe that's just projection, if I was in Boba Fett's shoes or in the Sarlacc's belly, I feel like I would probably have PTSD being trapped in that thing. He doesn't. He climbs back in it again to look for his armor. To me, that's pretty powerful. That's talk about a guy who's facing his demons, because I don't think they're feared. He's clearly not scared of this thing at all. He gets right in its face. But I found that really, really cool. Absolutely.
And to me too, especially with the kind of the destruction of the Sarlacc with the seismic charge, that's kind of like a metaphorical and literal burying of the past in a way. Even though he's searching for this armor and he feels like he needs it, but he doesn't really need it, as he's shown. He's taken out guards, he's taken out biker gangs, he's led the Tuskens. He's done all this without the armor. And that I go back to that vision sequence from when he got his gaffy stick and he's tied to the tree, and he's literally in his armor when he breaks out there. I feel like that was a real metaphorical resemblance of he doesn't need the armor. He is Boba Fett on his own, and the armor is an added benefit to him. The armor is an extension of him, not the armor is him.
Right. I like that. Yeah, kind of a Tony Stark thing going on there.
Absolutely, yeah.
So this is when he recruits Fennec, and then she says, I'm going to go along for the ride. And what actually happens after that Sarlacc pit sequence, there's really only, and we learn, and now that we're not in flashback mode anymore, that he is fully healed. And he's got his armor properly displayed there. Power loves the vacuum or hates the vacuum. So I got to make my play. I got to show up, got to show my face. There's only two real moments that I want to talk about for the rest of this episode. One is Chrysanthemum having a little beverage, innocuously enjoying himself. And then, of course, the ending sequence with the crime families themselves. Anthony, I'll let you start this one. Talk about Black Chrysanthemum and the casino. I think I'm curious what motivates him. I have a couple of ideas, but I wondered what you noticed.
Yeah, I mean, so in the sequence where Chrysanthemum's clearly had a few beverages, I saw a couple cups there, and he was downing one while he was looking longingly at the couple of group of Trandoshans over there.
A drunk, angry Wookiee that's cybernetically enhanced seems like a bad place to be.
Ex-Gladiator 2 at that.
Yes, exactly.
He was looking
Yeah.
to rumble, that's for sure. He knew what he was doing. It just he was not necessarily provoked. I felt like there was maybe some PTSD in there from his time being a
Yes.
gladiator, and
Mhm.
I'm sure there's a lot of trauma that went through that. And then, of course, being a bounty hunter too, it's a very ruthless game. And of course, the Trandoshans and Wookiees don't necessarily have the greatest history, as we
That's for
saw in the
darn sure.
Clone Wars, and that was something that I noticed too. Is like, oh, maybe that's like something that's in the back of his mind
Mhm.
playing out. They're looking at each other, and they didn't seem like they were too aggressive at all. They seemed like they were having a great time, just winning some money at the table. They're playing some sabacc, and he ruined that good time, that's for sure. And,
Yeah.
and all props to Madame Garza Whip for coming in there with a very nice
charm.
sombering story to charm it off. To no avail in the end, but she did a great job. At least I was convinced. I would have stopped if I were Chrysanthemum. It reminded me a lot of that lullaby that Scarlet that Black Widow tells the Hulk in the Avengers
Mhm.
films, and then Thor tries to do it in Ragnarok.
The sun's getting low.
Sun's getting low. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that kind of reminded me of that in a little bit in that sequence. But yeah, that was good. I also liked how Boba just wasn't. He wasn't. He didn't care at all about what was going on. He wasn't fazed at all about what was happening, and he just walks out right past him and said, "At least you tried."
Yep.
Oh, that was a good humorous moment.
I love that he calls him mate. Hey,
He
mate.
did, yeah. Hey, mate.
Love that so much. That's the second time he's called him that. Yeah, he was not fazed at all by it. And I didn't think about that, the Trandoshan Wookiee connection, but that makes sense to me about why it's there. At the end, after he removes the arm, the limb, as we know, Wookiees are known to do that. He gives the Twi'lek woman a little small sack of currency, of money, and I couldn't figure out why that was. She didn't seem to be bullied. She was laughing, having fun with the Trandoshans as well. But he gives her money, and I don't think it's payment for the drinks. Maybe it is. Maybe it is, but she did say they'd wipe off his debt, although he didn't honor his side of the bargain. But are you really going to argue with Black Chrysanthemum about nickels and dimes? Probably not. But I like that Chrysanthemum is sticking around, because, Tom, I hope that he sticks around for a long time. I can't get enough of this grumpy Wookiee. I love it.
He's great. He is. I was so happy when they went to that scene and he was sitting there with that cup, and just, I was like, oh boy, and that was the first thing I thought of when I noted that the Trandoshans were in front of him. I'm like, slavers. He is not gonna settle for this. So a couple things that we've talked about that I want to just bring up. First, I'll start with Black Chrysanthemum, and that is the fact that we've mentioned the arm being torn off at the end. I think that's really important part of the Wookiee mythology that they had to acknowledge. Mm-hmm. And they did it in the best kind of way. We thought he was settled down. She did a great job, as you guys mentioned, of bringing him down, and then he just does it to finish things. Just does it. I really love that mythology that they played out there. I thought that was wonderful. But we also learned that Black Chrysanthemum is not just a beast. He will. I mean, I certainly do believe 100% that she did bring him down. He was going to tear that place apart, and there wasn't going to be a Trandoshan left. And so she certainly stopped that. And I think he is willing to listen to reason. So I think that's important going forward, especially as Boba Fett brings him into the fold, that he's not going to be some wild card. He has moments of it, but he will listen to reason. And we saw that also when Boba Fett let him go, and he just sort of looked around at everybody, untrusting, but then ran. So there's that. I also wanted to point out after when he gets out of the back to tank, Dan, you mentioned that his armor is there. What I saw in that display of armor, it wasn't just that armor was sitting on a shelf or laying even neatly on the bed, ready to get dressed. It was presented like a warlord. And I really think that was intentional to give us the feeling that he has taken the helm, and he is finding ways to present himself as a force to be reckoned with. just the way the helmet sat on top, and then everything sort of built underneath it. It just felt like that was a really intentional display of the armor. So yeah, I really like that sequence. I still am not quite sure. I'm with you on the money. I'm still not sure exactly why Boba Fett showed up in the casino. I'm trying to remember like what the
I think
purpose
it's to
that.
recruit Chrysanthemum
Yeah.
completely.
Oh, okay. So you think?
Yeah.
Oh, so okay. So he knew that's where he would be. Okay.
That's my assumption.
All right.
Yeah, I think so. Anthony, we're going to say something?
I was just going to add, when I watched the episode with my wife just before we got on the air here, when Chrysanthemum was ripped off the Trandoshan's arm, she said, that'll grow back.
Nice. Nice.
She wasn't even phased at all by it. She said,
I
it
totally
happens.
missed that.
Another Tuesday.
Exactly. So at the very end of this, we have the thing we saw in the trailer, the crime lord sitting around, and basically Boba Fett saying, "Look, we need to work together. The Pikes have invaded. They're going to strip Tatooine of its natural resources." Like the Empire did, by the way. They didn't mention that, but that is what the Empire likes to do, or did. And pour one out for the old Empire. And not really. They got what they deserved. And so then they all say, my favorite part, and I'm just going to talk about this now, is when they say, well, why don't we just kill you? I mean, what stops from killing you? And all of a sudden, I had forgotten about the fact that Boba Fett has a new pet. And these claws yank up in the air, and you look down and you're like, oh my gosh, they're sitting on the trapdoor. And then Boba Fett just kind of smiles. Like, Boba Fett doesn't have to openly threaten. He can just be more like subtle. It's not really passive aggressive. It's more just like, well, okay, if that's what you want to do. That's cool. So then he says, have a seat. And they do. Surprisingly, no one tries to run away. But we see that Boba Fett, his protocol is to lay down the law. This is what I want to happen. You want to do that? That's cool. Stay out of my way. I'll stay out of your way. We're good. Like, there's no grudge. There's no uncertainty or like, I got my eyes on you, or I'm going to get revenge on you, or how dare you double cross me. You've never seen that with any kind of gangster in anything of any genre ever. Mm-hmm. And I want to see how it works out. We've only got a couple of episodes left as far as we know. But boy, if it isn't interesting, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think how to say this. I'm so glad that they didn't give me what I thought I wanted. Mm-hmm. Through this entire scene, I wanted him to I wanted him to make his fist, pound the table, show some force, maybe pick up his bifle and pick someone off. But that's the old Boba Fett. If that would have even been Boba Fett in the past. Yeah, we don't know. But that's what I wanted him to do. But he took the road that he has paved for himself, as we're going to be I'm going to lead, but I'm going to lead by respect. And he gives them options. They choose the one that, is most self-serving to them. But he's like, that's fine. That's fine. I will take care of the Pikes, but you're going to stay out of it. You're going to stay neutral. And I wasn't sure what the answer would be. And, we know it was satisfactory, but I didn't know that that's what I wanted in that scene. And I thought it was wonderful because it just shows that this new Boba Fett has values. And again, I go back to, this comes from his time with the Tusken Raiders, or I was surprised to see them named as Sand People in this. I was a little surprised by that, but I mean, not bad. It just didn't dawn on me that
we haven't heard that term in a long time.
Yeah. I mean, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I don't know.
But that was like the first movie.
Yeah,
they've been Tuskens ever since. Really,
right. And so I just go back. That's where this all stems from, is his time with them, and he's sticking to his guns. No pun intended. But I loved the way he worked that out. Now I can't wait to see how he's going to do this. But he does have, like they say in the Avengers, we have a Hulk. he's got a chrysanthemum.
And a Rancor.
And a Rancor, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yes, he's got a Rancor.
Yes. Anthony, what do you make of this particular moment?
Yeah, I mean, just echoing Tom's statements here, this is exactly like the political intrigue that I find very fascinating that this series is able to give us on a ground level, right? You're seeing all the families of Mos Espa here sitting at one table. And frankly, I mean, I'm in grad school and we learn about business practices and leadership in those classes. And we're learning here that, again, Boba could be putting his hand on the fist and ruling with fear, but instead he's looking out for what will best reach these people sitting at the table here? How can I best influence them to work for the way that I want them to, while also feeling they have met their needs? And these are for-profit enterprises that these families are running, and they have a bottom line. That's it. That's all that matters. They'll keep doing something until it's no longer profitable. So he explains to them how, if you follow his plan, that'll be more profitable for them in the end run, right? So all they need to do is just stay neutral, stay out of the way, and in the end, they'll have their pockets lined. They won't have to deal with Boba. They'll have their own territories to run. No tributes necessary between each of them. It's a very fair deal right now, as long as they just stay neutral. So who knows? We'll see if all that comes to pass. The wheel will keep turning, and it'll be fascinating to see.
So speaking of the wheel turning, at the end, we get one of the greatest winks to us as an audience I think I've ever experienced in Star Wars, where they don't spell it out, but something happens where they talk about, I guess we're gonna have to get ready for war. I need warriors. Earlier he'd said that I needed muscle and brains, and you have both, which I really liked him talking about Fennec. And I haven't said it yet, but yes, I agree with both of you. Finally, we get a Fennec-centered episode where she gets to do more than just make a few comments and just be in the background and be a foil, as you mentioned. I think, Anthony, it's nice to see her really get some equal airtime. And she says, I know where we can get some warriors. And then you hear, gentlemen, the Mandalorian theme. What else could it possibly be? We don't speculate on the show, but in the episode, they play the Mandalorian's music as they pan off. We know that the Mandalorian knows these two. We know that they've got a great working history together. Dare we hope, gentlemen, that we're going to see the Mandalorian in the next episode? I really can't think of anything cooler than that, honestly, but I guess we'll find out. Tom, go ahead and weigh in on that, and then any last-minute thoughts you have as we close out the episode.
So we got the little, we got the couple notes early in when we reintroduce ourselves to Fennec Shannon. So when that boom, boom comes at the very end, holy smokes. I mean, I might have cheered. I don't remember now, but I was super, super excited to hear that. And I couldn't believe it was over. The one thing you told me about the episode today, Dan, at work, is you said, it's just so you're aware, it's longer. And so when that happened, I was like, what? This can't possibly be over. I want to say that these episodes of Boba Fett are the fastest minutes of Star Wars that I mean, even faster than Clone Wars, than Mandalorian. These are the fastest minutes of Star Wars that I think I've ever experienced. So I have lots of ideas in my head. I'm going to write them out on a piece of paper. I'm going to put them in an envelope, and I'm going to seal it as to who I think the muscle is going to be. Because I think it could be a whole host of different characters, and maybe I'm putting it in an envelope.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that envelope. It probably in a couple weeks, but it was a great teaser. It was a great way to end the show with so much anticipation. I forget the weekend. Let's get to next Wednesday, you guys.
I know, right? I was I'm happy to hear you say that, because I've heard a lot of people saying that these episodes are all too slow. I don't feel like they're slow. I feel like there's just a lot packed in, and I think this is methodical storytelling. So I'm glad to hear that I'm not the only one that feels that way. Anthony, anything you want to say about the ending moments we're talking about, the familiar music that we know so well, and last minute thoughts on the episode overall?
It was absolutely a perfect way to end just a fantastic episode, and just so simple too. How it's just a few simple notes and we're all just able to recognize it, and just I fell out of my chair listening to it, and I thought, what a way to subvert my own expectations, because I personally wasn't expecting Din Djarin to pop up at all in this series. I thought he'd be off doing something else with Bo-Katan and other Mandalorians, and he's trying to find himself now without Grogu in the picture. And now that he may be coming into this fold, I'd be very fascinating to see what a post Grogu Din Djarin looks like, and how that might affect who he is and the interaction with Boba. So just very, very excited to see where this all can go here. And one last thought that I wanted to have on record before closing out the show here is, I think we found my favorite name in all of Star Wars now. It used to be Therm Scissor Punch, but now with the Aqualish leader, Master Garfala Quax has now taken the lead. And to hear Matt Berry say it a few times as 8D8 was just the icing on the cake of the day.
So I know you don't like needles, but that would make for a nice tattoo.
It really would.
Right on the old bicep. Well, this was great, guys. A fantastic episode. Tom, did we make you change your grade, or are you at peace with the A?
I'm at peace with the A. Yep.
Good deal. I'm glad. I think we're all happy with our grades as well. So,
absolutely.
Anthony, thank you so much for being on Coffee with Kenobi. You were fantastic, as I knew you would be. Please let everybody know where they can find you, continue the conversation, and let us know about Force Ghost Conversations, too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can be found at Force Ghost Conversations. We release episodes weekly, and we can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, basically any place you can find a podcast these days. Just search Force Ghost Conversations. We'll be there. You can also find us on Twitter at Force Ghost Pod, and Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook by just searching Force Ghost Conversations.
And so let us know, what is it that makes Force Ghost Conversations unique in the world of Star Wars podcasting?
Yeah.
Well, what makes us totally unique is that it's my personal voice, and we do nothing but positive, fun, cozy, engaging Star Wars deep dives each and every week. So as we've been breaking down the Book of Boba Fett episodes, and we look forward to all the great things coming out in 2022, come along for the ride.
Tremendous.
Excellent.
And I could not recommend Force Ghost Conversations highly enough. Be sure to subscribe to it. You will not be sorry that you did. Tom, what about you, little buddy? Sorry, I can't help it. Little buddy, by the way, is a compliment. I say that to my students, to my kids, to my friends. It's a good thing.
I've never told you this, but that's what my dad used to call me.
No way.
So
that's cool.
yeah. So I'm
That's
used
so
to
cool.
You say it, and I think of my dad. So I like that.
Well, I'm glad. I will take that.
Well, you can always catch me on Twitter. At Draftline is where you find me to talk Star Wars, or really just about anything. Draftline is a cycling term, so you can talk to me anything on Draftline. Podcast that I co-host is called Teachers in the Dungeon. If you loved the break into the castle and sort of the castle scene and sneaking around in there, that's the kind of stuff we talk about on Dungeons and Dragons and on Teachers in the Dungeon. So join me there at Dungeon Teachers on Twitter, Teachers in the Dungeon on Facebook and Instagram. Join us there. We're a weekly podcast. Again, all the same places that Anthony, your podcast is, same for ours. So join us there for Dungeons and Dragons talk. Catch me on CWK Pour Over with Dan and Corey Club. Love to talk there as well. So any of those places, catch up with me.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.